Aries season is about to give us a run for our money. It's about to be a rocky road. It's about to be the most Aries season that there has been in a long time. Now, astrology is never anything to fear. It's something to use. It's just something that we keep in our back pocket to go back to take a look at, to help us with what is ahead. This Aries season might be extra fiery, but I'm going to tell you all about it. And not only that, we're going to be talking more in depth today about the eclipses of 2024. Hello. Welcome back to the Self-Love Archives podcast. My name is Julia Salvia, and I am your self-love bestie. Girl, there is some shit coming our way. And it actually begins tomorrow. If you are listening in on the day that this episode goes live, which is March 25th, we are kicking Aries season, that is, off with an eclipse in Libra, a lunar eclipse in Libra on March 25th. Now, astrology can be really daunting. It can be really overwhelming. It can also be this really fun thing to partake in. But as I always say, it's a lot more complicated than just the surface level. But today, rather than getting super complicated, rather than handing you this giant book of information, I'm going to dumb down the astrology for you for the eclipses of 2024 and Aries season, because Aries season is jam-packed with a lot of big astrology that I would love for you to use in your favor. The universe, I believe, is always working in our favor, but let me tell you what is going on, how you can make the best of it, and really set yourself up for all of these endings and beginnings that these eclipses in 2024 are going to provide to us. Whenever I talk to any of my friends about astrology, they're like, Julia, please dumb it down for me. Talk to me like I'm a kindergartner trying to learn astrology. Don't tell me any of the astrology. Just tell me what's happening. Just tell me how this is going to affect me. I think sometimes, though, to understand the astrology, we have to understand what's actually going on, because there is something physically going on in the sky when all of these things happen. When you hear about a Mercury retrograde, when you hear about a full moon, when you hear about an eclipse, when you hear about a cazimi, there is something going on in the sky that we sometimes can see with the naked eye. Sometimes we can't, but most times, we can see a full moon, or we can see a new moon, or lack thereof, because we can't really see a moon in the sky when there's a new moon. But you get my point. Every year, eclipses are something that end up being the most important moments, or some of the most important moments to look at when we're looking at the year as a whole in astrology. And that's because eclipses usually kind of blow up our life a little bit. They're essentially endings and beginnings, and they tell us this story about what is really going to be like the theme of our lives in that specific year, in this case, in 2024. Of course, to know exactly what those themes are, you have to know your rising sign and your charts. So if you haven't figured out your rising sign yet, it's very easy to do so. You just need the time you were born, where you were born, and of course the day you were born, and just plug all that in to really, there's so many astrology sites at this point, but I love chani.com. I love Cafe Astrology. You can use CoStar if you have to. I know a lot of people are very familiar with CoStar, but there are a ton of different apps that you can use that can just spit that information out for you and really tell you what's going on. The other thing that I mentioned too that I think a lot of us don't think about, again, it's not going to give you such an advanced answer, but using AI technology to ask it questions about your astrology is also very helpful as well. I recently discovered this new app called Astra, and you do have to pay for it if you pass asking it 3-ish questions a day. I think you get 3-ish questions a day for free, and then you'd have to pay for it. But each day you get a couple new questions to ask it, and it provides really great information. So something to consider. I think now that the world is becoming so much more open to astrology, there are so many different resources that you can use to figure out your chart and your information. But the most important one to go off of is your rising sign. So what's going on? What the heck is going on? Well, there's a couple things, okay? As I mentioned, there's a lot going on in Aries season. We kick off Aries season with a lunar eclipse in Libra on March 25th. Then on April 1st, April Fool's Day, but this is no April Fool's, we have Mercury going retrograde. Then on April 8th, we have another eclipse, this time a solar eclipse, and this one is going to be in Aries. On April 10th, we have a Mars conjunct Saturn in Pisces. In the midst of that little bit of chaos in the beginning of April, on April 11th, we have a Sun in Aries conjunct Mercury in Aries. A really beautiful moment, a Mercury cazimi in Aries. And then as we finally reach the very tail end of the Mercury retrograde on April 19th, we have a Mercury in Aries conjunct a Venus in Aries. And then right before the retrograde ends, we go into Taurus season on the 19th of April. So I'm going to tell you what all this means, how I'm interpreting all of this upcoming excitement for April, for most of April, and for basically all of Aries season. And then we're also going to get into the 2 future eclipses that are happening late summer and early fall. So in eclipse, what's literally happening in our sky during an eclipse is that there is a partial or total blocking or obscuring of a planet. So whenever you hear of an eclipse, usually that means that it's like the sun, the moon, the earth are all coming together and something is blocking something else. So we can't see it, or we partially can't see it. I have personally never actually seen an eclipse. It is said that it is bad luck and also probably not good for your eyes, literally not good for your eyes to look at an actual eclipse. But in a figurative way, and how we interpret eclipses, not only are they really big moments in our years, but they can essentially create huge changes or shifts. They create this like a very much unexpectedness. Of course, they can be subtle. It really depends on where this lands for you and how this kind of all comes to fruition for you. But the biggest thing that you need to know is that an eclipse is usually a pretty big moment. It's a big moment for endings and beginnings. Lunar eclipses are usually representative of endings, and solar eclipses are representative of beginnings. And what happens during beginnings and endings when we talk about starting something new or letting something go? We are changing, we are transforming, and there is most likely spiritual growth. So on March 25th, Monday, March 25th, we are experiencing a lunar eclipse in Libra. Libra is all about balancing of the scales. It's all about harmony. Libra is ruled by the love planet, Venus, which is also known as the relationship planet. So you can expect with this lunar eclipse in Libra that there's going to be a lot of, why did I want to say like chitter chatter? There's going to be a lot of talk, a lot of conversations about reinforcing romantic or just reinforcing relationships in general, reinforcing the boundaries that you have in those relationships, especially that Pisces is in. Saturn right now. Any of those of you going through your Saturn return, I feel you, I get it, same. Okay, same. So without all of the astrology mixed in there, you're like, Julia, what do I gotta do? What does this mean? The moon and Libra like each other, right? They like each other. So when you have a planet and a sign that like each other, but something's happening, aka the eclipse, that isn't so lovely, if you will, it usually lessens the blow. So this first initial lunar eclipse in Libra isn't going to be so harsh to us. I think that we may get a little emotional. We may really try to figure out, okay, what time, like what do I need to let go of right now in regards to my relationship? Like what isn't working? What isn't allowing those scales to balance? What isn't giving this relationship that I have with whatever it may be, harmony? And you can look to where you have Libra in your chart. If you are a Virgo rising like myself, you have Libra in the second house of material things. So to give you an example of how that shows up is, I'm not surprised that I wrote on my calendar for Monday that I need to clean out my closet. I need to purge all of these material things from my closet because this lunar eclipse is about endings. It's time to purge all of these things, throw them away, sell them, donate them, do with whatever. It's time to clean the slate. So where do you see yourself doing that in your life when it comes to what is going to help you balance out and create more harmony in whatever that relationship is? For me, that's the relationship that I have with my material things. Things are looking a little chaotic in my house right now when it comes to stuff, just physical stuff. And I'm just ready to really get rid of a lot of it and come back to a very like clean space. But how can I make that work for me where I still keep all of the things that I love? I still have my stuff, but I let a lot of it go. So where is this Libra in your chart, and where can you better the scales in that part of your chart? How can you better that relationship with yourself? A great question to ask on Monday or to yourself right now in this very moment or throughout the week of the lunar eclipse is, where in your relationship, whatever that relationship is with a physical person, a material thing, whatever it may be, where are you spreading yourself too thin? Then we move on to the most exciting thing of April, right on April Fool's Day. And this is no fool. This is no joke. It is not April Fool's Day right now. There is a Mercury retrograde happening on April 1st. All jokes aside. All jokes aside for this one. I know you're wishing and hoping that on April Fool's Day, that on April 1st, I come and say, April Fools, I'm sorry. I don't know if the planets in the sky really acknowledge April Fool's Day. And I'm not sure that this Mercury retrograde will be a funny one. As we know, all Mercury retrogrades have to do with communication. It has to do with the way that we receive or give information. Transportation is another one that all the Asians, communication, transportation, information, all of those things are things that we're going to visit, essentially. What's literally happening when a Mercury retrograde happens, you guys, is that the planet's just moving backwards. Every time there's any sort of retrograde, it just means that the planet, instead of moving clockwise, is moving counterclockwise. So it's going backwards. And what happens when you go backwards? You need to revisit things. You need to re-look at something. So this is this Mercury retrograde, all of April essentially is asking you to look back at something. And it's also asking us to kind of start anew, because a couple days later, after the Mercury retrograde starts, on April 8th, we have a solar eclipse in Aries. And solar eclipses are all about beginnings. Maybe a little bit of a shake-up kind of beginning, a forcible beginning, a beginning that changes a lot for us. But before we get into that, let's think about Aries for a second. Aries are impulsive, they're aggressive, they're competitive, they're high energy, they're passionate, they're direct. And that is what this Mercury retrograde is really going to be all about. But it's going to come down to the way that we receive and give information, the way that we communicate, and our transportation. So, you hear all of the classic things about Mercury retrogrades, like don't sign any contracts, be careful with your conversations, maybe don't go travel. You do whatever the hell you want to do. But here's what I say during Mercury retrogrades. Pay attention. Especially during this one, pay attention to any misinterpretations, any miscommunication. Being very direct during this Mercury retrograde might not get you what you want. There may be high tempers. So I think overall, during these couple of weeks, during the entire month of April, you might as well just start right now. Practice patience. Practice patience. Don't have risky conversations if they don't need to happen right this second. And don't have any expectations of being direct, because I think it's going to get a little bit lost in translation. Then we jump into the solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. Not only is there a solar eclipse happening in Aries on April 8th, but there is also a Chiron Cazimi, which is a very lovely moment in the midst of I would say like a bit of a chaotic moment. We know all the things about Aries, right? Impulsiveness, passionate, direct, and that's kind of going just a little bit awry. We're feeling very impatient during the Mercury retrograde in Aries. So when this solar eclipse in Aries comes along, we're still feeling that energy, and I would almost say at this point, tenfold, but in more of a transformative way. Chiron is a really interesting placement to understand. It's something that, as someone who's really into self-love, clearly, I look to Chiron a lot, because Chiron is the placement or the additional planet, if you will. It's not actually a planet, but it is. The meaning of Chiron is pain and healing. It's where you find pain, but also where you'll find healing. So I think what this very beginning, or in totality, what all of these Aries things that are happening and all of these Aries things that are going on, what the universe is asking of us is to find where we are struggling, where we are feeling pain, wherever we have this Aries. Again, check your chart where you have Aries. I'm a Virgo rising. I have Aries in the 8th house of inheritance, taxes, debts, all of those things. If you are a Taurus rising, you have Aries in the 12th house of the subconscious. So check your rising sign and see where Aries sits for you. So we're essentially looking at an old problem with a new perspective. Maybe a perspective that we didn't expect. Maybe a change that we didn't expect. An answer to an old problem that we have been trying to answer. The first two eclipses that are happening for 2024 are continuing a story from last year. For our lunar eclipse in Libra, do you remember what happened during the fall of 2023, around October 14th. We had a solar eclipse in Libra on October 14th. And this was asking us to take a look at our people-pleasing tendencies, to look at our relationship patterns, to look at those balancing skills and essentially ask ourselves, how can we create harmony here? So now in 2024, on March 25th, we're kind of asking ourselves the same question and closing out a bit of that chapter. And so we revisit it next and continue the storyline later on in the summer. The same thing, we're continuing a story for the solar eclipse in Aries. We witnessed a solar eclipse in Aries on April 19th, 2023. So take it back just a little bit, about a year, and ask yourself what was going on then. There was a lot of restlessness, feeling wired, kind of this nonstop, this go, 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 go. Where are we continuing to see or feel that continuation of this ambition, this wiredness now here in 2024 and upcoming in April? The last eclipse of this initial eclipse season, I think, is really just asking us or telling us that rejection is redirection. Right after we pass by this eclipse and Cazimi on the 8th, we are jumping into a bit of just a challenging day, and that is April 10th. Mars is going to be conjunct Saturn in Pisces on April 10th. And this is going to give you kind of like a little bit of a stop sign. When Saturn moved into Pisces about a little over a year ago at this point, we have all been in this state of revisiting our boundaries and asking ourselves, how can we create better boundaries? Because you know how I said Libra and the moon are like this, they're like friends. Yes, Saturn and Pisces are like opposites of each other, and they have a really tough time coming together because Pisces is so dreamy and Saturn is like, no, we need to be responsible. We need to have boundaries. And it's tough when you're this dreamy, creative person who truly is boundless, and bringing that together with the planet of Saturn that is obviously not that. So when that's met with a planet like Mars, Mars is very, very similar in its energy to that of Aries, very fiery, very impulsive, very aggressive, very competitive. And when we bring those energies together, it's a tough moment. And nothing in astrology, as I always say, when we come to a more challenging piece or part of astrology, nothing in astrology is bad. Nothing in astrology is inherently bad. Things are going to come and things are going to go. And it's kind of just this, we're here. I'm telling you about all of this so that we can work with this energy, not against it. I loved what Hermes astrology said. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but we're just going to go with it. Balance action with caution and have assertiveness with patience. So it's having this fiery energy of Mars, but balancing it out with what Saturn is asking us to do. So it's being actionable, being assertive, being impulsive, being direct, but pausing for a moment before we fully commit to that directness, before we fully commit to that assertiveness, and proceed with caution, proceed with patience. It's a yield sign. Maybe it's a stop sign. I think for most of us, it's going to be a stop sign. We need to stop first. Look left, Look right. Maybe look ahead. Look left, look right again. Look behind you. And then proceed with caution. And that is the tough astrology of April. We really get a whole mouthful of it the first barely 2 weeks of April and barely halfway through Aries season. So it's going to be, as I said, a little rocky road. If you like rocky road ice cream, get yourself a little pint because it's going to be a bumpy ride. But I think it's going to be a good ride. I think that we're going to finish a lot of things. I think in a sense of letting things go, purging things in regards to Libra. We're going to really help ourselves balance things out. And while our communication might be a little awry, I think by the end of Aries season, we are going to feel a little bit better about everything. One really lovely moment during Aries season is actually today, as this podcast goes live, the 24th of March. But the one that I know you're actually going to be able to prepare for is going to be April 11th. Every single time we have a Mercury retrograde, we have a Mercury cazimi settled right in the middle of it. It's kind of like the eye of the storm. And what happens in the eye of the storm? Well, it's sunshine and rainbows and, well, there's just complete chaos all around us, right? So that eye of the storm is on April 11th. There is a Mercury cazimi happening. It's essentially when Mercury and the sun come together. It's a very lovely, very beautiful moment. So if you do need a moment to do anything important, anything that is where you need your head screwed on straight, where you do need to have a conversation, where you do need to travel, you do need to get something done, I would do it on April 11th. One of my friends actually was telling me that she has been trying to figure out when she's going to move. Immediately told her April 11th. She's like, I don't know what day, April 11th. She's like, I know I want to move in April. I just don't know what day yet. And I was like, April 11th. I'm not, no other day, April 11th. Of course, if something has to be done, something has to be said, any other day in April, proceed with caution. Proceed with caution. You got to do what you got to do. You cannot always do things aligned with the astrology, but when you know it, it can be helpful in preparing yourself for whatever it is that is going on. Gives you a one-up. The Mercury retrograde in Aries finally goes direct. Mercury goes direct on April 25th, just a few days into Taurus season. But right before we get into Taurus season, there's a couple small moments happening that are going to lighten up the mood a little bit as we approach the end of the retrograde and pass by the eclipse season, or at least the first eclipse season of 2024. So an additional moment that is happening besides our Mercury cazimi, which by the way is an amazing time to do anything, but more specifically, it is an amazing time to take the lead. It is an amazing time to be passionate, to speak passionately. It is a very, very lovely day to communicate directly. It's a very lovely day. Remember, eye of the storm. The other day that is really lovely is going to be April 19th, which is actually the day that the sun moves into Taurus. It's the first day of Taurus season. But before we jump into Taurus season, Mercury in Aries is going to conjunct Venus in Aries. And this is exactly what you think it is. Mercury, communication, Venus, love and relationships. It's going to be a really lovely day to bring some passionate energy into your relationships. Of course, Mercury is still retrograde in this moment. It's not so much that of a Mercury cazimi, but it's still a really lovely conjunction, Venus and Mercury being together in Aries. It's a moment to say how you feel passionately, but still proceed with caution on what you're saying and how you're saying it. And then we finally enter Taurus season. And Taurus season is definitely a lot lighter. I think April, beginning of April, nonetheless, is going to give us a run for our money, maybe literally. But May is going to be a beautiful, beautiful month. We just need to get through a couple of weeks first. So our takeaways for Aries season, I think the biggest takeaway is to proceed with caution. You can still go, you can still continue, you can still travel and communicate and share information and do all of these things, but it's to proceed with caution. It is to stop, take a breath first, and then continue on, which can be very difficult for Aries. But we got this. A couple months down the line, we enter into the last two eclipses of 2024. And those are happening on September 17th and October 2nd. I wanted to share this piece of information with you because I have been very much thinking about planning my 30th birthday trip cruise. I've been really wanting to go on this one cruise. And if I have the ability to, I will use astrology or look at the astrology before I plan a trip or before I do something because of experience. I think in general, I always looked, and then the one time I didn't, it ended up being a rough trip. But I think it all worked out for the best because I came home from that very rough trip and I met the love of my life. So I think in the grand scheme of things, it all does work out the way it's supposed to. So I never take the astrology in a way where it stops me from doing things. It is just a way of understanding. It is just an additional little note in my book, in my big archive, in order to help me make decisions. Again, if I have to do something, because that's life, I have to do something. If I have to go somewhere, if I have to talk to someone, I have to do those things because that's life. But I proceed with caution always, but definitely proceeding with caution for this April. Now, on September 17th of this year, we are going to have a lunar eclipse in Pisces. This one I'm kind of interested to see how it comes to fruition, just because myself, I'm a Pisces stellium, which means that I have multiple placements in Pisces. So I'm interested to see how this one comes to fruition for me, but comes to fruition for a lot of us because Saturn will still be in Pisces. And as we know already, Saturn and Pisces are just kind of like, I would say they are like best friends that are just so opposite from each other. I think of like the angel and the devil, like on our shoulders. Like, how can we get the angel and the devil to come together and be like, let's be friends? Energies are a little different. We've got one that's super dreamy, one that's super realistic. So this lunar eclipse in Pisces, lunar eclipse is an ending. I really believe that this is going to be confronting our issues head on. It's really going to be asking us about those boundaries, about those responsibilities that we have been taking a look at over the past year. And at that point, maybe about a year and a half into it. And it's asking us how our feelings affect our actions. So How are we feeling in this moment? And how is how I'm feeling right now affecting how I'm actually actionably doing something? Am I setting this boundary because of this feeling that I have, this momentary feeling? Or am I setting this boundary because this is going to better my emotional health or my physical health or my mental health? Am I setting this boundary because it is better for the relationship as a whole? Or am I setting this boundary for maybe the not so right reasons? We then go into our last eclipse of 2024, and that is the solar eclipse in Libra on October 2nd. We talked about the balance and the harmony that Libra is always constantly asking us to do. How are we balancing out those scales? How are we harmonizing while out of balance? And how are we harmonizing when we're literally in balance? How are we finding balance in our lives? Because balance isn't just about being in balance, it's about finding the harmony of the in between, finding the balance of being in balance and being out of balance. Libra's a very humanitarian sign. So when I think of Libra, I think of a judge, right? We have the scales. And this solar eclipse, this beginning, is going to be asking us or telling us to stand up for what we believe in without giving away so much of our power or too much of our power. It's going to be this moment of asking us what has been a waste of our energy. What are we going to let go of? Trying to make a decision during anything that has to do with Libra is going to be, especially eclipses in Libra, are going to make making decisions difficult. So be kind to yourself in these moments. Be nice to yourself in these moments. A decision doesn't necessarily have to be made right now, today. The decision can be that you're going to make a decision tomorrow, that you're going to decide whether it's a yes or no, whether it's a right or left, whether you are going to take the job or not. That decision does not have to be made right this second. And the decision can be that you're going to make the decision at XYZ time. And those are our eclipses for 2024, along with all of the packed astrology for April or Aries season of 2024. I hope that this was insightful. I hope that this helped you prep and prepare for what is to come. Remember to use astrology as a tool. It is a tool to help you understand you. You don't need to live off of or by astrology. Energies change, things change. Use astrology as a tool of understanding, as a way to help yourself prepare. Kind of in the same way that you would prepare for a test or prepare for a vacation or prepare for a new day. Remember that the universe always works in our favor. And sometimes things are blessings in disguise. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's podcast episode. I will see you guys back here in 2 weeks when we are deep in the midst of this Mercury retrograde. It will be the day before the solar eclipse in Aries, and I can't wait to hear all about how your Aries season is going. But I promise April 7th, will be a great episode that will give us some peace, some reassurance, and some love in the midst of this passionate Aries season. I will see you guys in 2 weeks, same time, 12 o'clock Eastern time. I'm sending you lots of strength, lots of love, and lots of patience. I'll see you soon.